You know, no trees had to die for tonight's classes. But I do have slides, so hopefully that will make up for it. And maybe Dale will bless you with 2 handouts next time, which would be extra exciting for some of you, I'm sure. So Genesis, right? Here we are talking about Genesis. Today we're going to be in the Tower of Babel. Here, the picture here is, you know, the idea of Mount Sinai and the people there. But so when we talk about Genesis, just in terms of introduction and summary leading us up to the Tower of Babel, Genesis starts with, on the other side of Genesis 1 and 2, there's a creation story. That story is as much about introducing God, Yahweh, what that God is about in a world of gods, in the world where every people group claimed and had belief in gods. And who is this God, Yahweh? And what are the claims he's making? What kind of God is he? So the creation story there parallels a lot of interesting things and is in direct conversation with other creation stories of its day. And so, but then on the side of Genesis 3 forward, we have 4 main stories describing what does the world now look like on the other side, where humanity, instead of ruling as God created them to be, instead of embodying the image of God, instead of collaboratively, relationally carrying out God's purpose, they're going to create a world where the presence of God is an exclusive, where the whispers of the serpent, where chaos is at play, where death is a reality. And Genesis 3 to 11 has these 4 stories: the fall, which is Genesis 3, the story of Cain and Abel, the flood, and then tonight's emphasis, the Tower of Babel. Each one of these stories is trying to tell you something of what will the world from there forward look like without the presence, the exclusive presence of God. So each one of these stories has its own details, but they're also trying to show you something broader about the reality we now all find ourselves in, okay? And in summary, what that world is now is a world of 2 conflicting realities. I really like this image because it kind of shows visually what that might look like. The idea that there is the world that God intended, the world that reflects the presence of God, but also the world that reflects now the presence of the serpent, of evil, a world of death, of darkness, of chaos, of power playing, of conflict. And you and I, humanity, is co-creating these worlds. We are under the influence, and we sometimes partner with God and sometimes partner with the serpent, and we are co-creating this mess. Because this conflict of world is also happening within us. And then it comes out. So whatever you look around and see is really a symptom, an expression, a projection of what's happening inside of us. And if we lean one way or lean the other, the kind of worlds we create, okay? So just to give you a visual here, we are right there, the Tower of Babel, you know, these main stories moving along. So what's the Tower of Babel about? The Tower of Babel is in Genesis 11. The Tower of Babel, if the numbers listed in Genesis of all these ages and things are meant to be a chronology, and there's debates on that, but if they are, we're about 101 years after the flood. So this isn't next weekend, okay? There's a good amount of time going on. And we're about 300 years before the call of Abraham. So just to kind of put a place in here. So, the Tower of Babel. Right after the flood, God reiterated the same sentence that he told Adam and Eve to go out, to multiply, to fill the earth, okay, to scatter, multiply, fill the earth. Well, what we're going to see instead is like people trying to come together and unify under something different than what God has called humanity to do. Okay? So, the Tower of Babel. Here's how we start. Chapter 11, verse 4. Come, let us build ourselves a city. Let me pause there. Anybody? This is extra points. You get a smiley face or a little star. What other time up to now in the biblical story do you have somebody going out to build a city?
Nimrod?
That's part of it. Before. I thought Cain. So Cain kills Abel, and then God, Abel is now going to go geographically further from God as he is already spiritually on a journey away from God, right? So God sends him off, like further he goes, and it says that he then goes and starts to build a city. Now, what kind of city do you expect to be built? And not just like a literal, the point isn't just here's some buildings, is what kind of community, what kind of humanity you think you're going to be able to create without the presence of God? Violence, death, abuse, everybody does whatever, looks right to them. And that's what he goes out and creates. And so here we have another attempt of humanity now on the other side of not just one brother killing the other, like not just one moment of death. We have the whole flood worth of death. We have a humanity going out to build a city. Now, if you're following along in the story up to now, you're like, this can't be good, because it hasn't been so far, okay? So, all right, come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. All right, anybody? What already pops out of this that you're like, this might not work out well?
The arrogance of, so we'll be ready.
Yeah, so that we can make a name for ourselves. Doesn't humanity already created to bear a name? What name are we to bear? Yahweh, right? The image of God. But they're going to go out and bear a different name. Okay, what else? What strikes you here is?
They will exalt themselves.
Okay.
Want a tower.
Yeah.
Reach the heavens.
There's an exaltation of self. And obviously God is anti-tall buildings. Right?
Well, Jesus said, "Lo, I will be with you."
That's right? Way down at the bottom, at the basement. Yeah, like this just messes up the landscape, right? Okay, what's happening here? A couple of things. One is, in the ancient world, what's translated, the problem is English. It's translated here just a tall tower. And you and I think of towers, I mean, that's neither good nor bad. It's at best neutral, right? Well, the word there is really talking about a religious building. It's a spiritual building. It's a building with a purpose. And that was called in the ancient world a ziggurat. And actually there's been excavations that has shown different versions of this in the ancient world. Maybe it looks something similar to this sketch of what that city, that world, that building would have looked like. So it's not just tall, like it's building staircase upon itself. And the idea behind these religious buildings, these ziggurats, were to connect the heavens and the earth. Why is that significant? What's the heavens and the earth about?
Well, if you read that there, where God lived was on the mountain, so they were trying to place themselves maybe on his level or he lived or whatever.
Yeah, so when you read in Genesis 1, in the beginning, God creates the heavens and the earth. We're not yet talking sky and lump of rock. We're talking about probably a better translation for us to say the same thing is creating like the realms. the spiritual realm and the physical realm. So the world of the gods were in the heavens. There's a few gods below, but those are particular specific gods. The gods live in the above, okay, because they're more, they're better, they're powerful, so they're the above. And we live down in this physical reality. Now, if you are, a person in the ancient Near East, you want the gods to be, favorable to you. You want the heavens to look down upon you favorably. You want means and ways and mechanics to connect with the heavens so that the blessings of the heavens, the power of the heavens can be upon you. So any tall building, any tall mountain, any tall hill, that's normally where you would go to offer prayers, offer sacrifice, construct buildings, because you want that to be closer to the gods. Okay? So tall places meant closer to the gods. And here they are constructing one extra tall, because, by the way, of the use of new technology. The brick. Right? They fashion new technology, and they're going to use new technology to exalt self, right? To build this tall structure. And not only that, it is calling people to this place that can specially connect you to the heavens, to the gods. Now, later, the tabernacle, and then much later, the temple is representing that. Because that's where God says, I will be accessible. You can connect with me. Now, the cool thing is God says, you can actually put me in a tent. In other words, go and I'll be with you. It's a God that's personal and willing to go, but that's later in the story. So here you have this Tower of Babel, extra tall religious building. And you would think in honor of what God or gods, right? It's a monument to something of the heavens. Well, but in this story, what is it actually a monument? What God is this honoring? Self. And people just take selfies today. We're still exalting the self. We want to be the center of our universe. We want to be gods. We want to be, the arbiter of what is right and best and cool. Like the whole, hashtag of whatever makes you happy, you do you, just obey your thirst. Like all these little slogans out there is because you are the center. And this is just it's a story saying the same thing that happened in Genesis 3, because the essence of what the serpent offers to Eve and Adam is, what is the temptation? What's the carrot at the end of the stick? You could be like God. And here you can put yourself up there with the gods. And that was such a fascinating, powerful, attractive slogan that people are coming to gather around that concept. I could be my God. I could be my own God. Do you understand what's happening here? Yeah, I don't think God's anti-tall buildings. But what this building symbolizes and the kind of community and city and humanity that is being attracted to this existence, to this reality. In a world where humans are the center and the ultimate arbiter of what's right, what do you think that's going to look like? Right? Whatever makes me happy, whatever I like. It's just always been a mess. So humanity is trying to bridge the worlds, right? It's trying to break the veil to access the heavens and put themselves there. Now, spoiler alert, much later in the story, this is obviously connecting to Jesus, to the tabernacle, the temple, Jesus. Jesus is the connecting point of two worlds. He is the heaven and the earth put together. Physical, a human, with the exclusive presence of God, right? He's the actual way to be this tower. And he's at the center, not us. His existence wasn't an elevation of humans, it was connecting the worlds. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about the geography of Tower of Babel. It says that this was in the plain of Shinar. To you and I, that's like, so what? Okay, the plain of Shinar is really the foundation of the landscape that will become Babylon. Now, what role does Babylon play in the ultimate story of the Bible? Like in the broad story, what are some things about Babylon? Oppression. What else?
Conquest.
Yes. What else? What happens with Babylon?
70 years of captivity.
Yes, Babylon is what comes and destroys the temple. The earthly structure that connected the heavens. The irony of that. What is Babylon founded on, if not an attempt to connect the heaven and earth, but connected in a way that elevates humans, not connects us to God? And they become the agent by which the connecting point of the worlds, at least at that point in time, right, is destroyed. The temple is first destroyed by the Babylonians, later by the Romans. And when John has his revelation, the book of Revelations, what does he call Rome? Babylon. Yeah. So Babylon becomes this archetypal, category of oppression, the kingdom of the snake, of connecting, trying to elevate humanity to the gods, to be a god. It becomes a symbol of destroying, oppressing God's people. It becomes a category that later Rome can come and sit in it. And who knows what other nations and people groups and movements would have the prophets of old said, and now that's the new Babylon, and now that's the new Babylon, and now that's the new Babylon. You understand? It becomes a category. And it starts early on here with its foundational premise is, let's be our own gods. Does this make sense?
Did the Egyptians do the same thing with the pyramids?
With versions, yeah, the Egyptians follow, one category that the Egyptians play into the story is the particular pharaoh during the oppression of Israel is not named in the Bible. It becomes just a category of pharaoh, and many versions fit into it, of trying to oppress God's people. Because around it in different places, the Bible is very specific about this king and this year and the third month of the first Saturday, but during that time it just leaves it the pharaoh.
Even the Mayan ruins, they all have those.
They all have tall buildings, yeah, so that becomes attempts to connect to the gods, yeah. Good. So, Shinar becomes Babylon. So, the geographical significance. It's the center of the ancient power, pride of Babylon. The theological meaning, it's a symbol of human rebellion and self-sufficiency. Now, the tower, or a ziggurat, was man-made, and it becomes an attempt to the heavens, right? A stairway to the heavens. It's a human effort to reach God, or the world of spiritual beings, without actually obeying Yahweh. It's let's just put ourselves up there and see how that goes. God early, like I said, right after the flood, calls people to scatter and go represent himself throughout. This instead is a movement of unity, but of movement of unifying people under the serpent, not God. Abraham's call from Ur, that's actually the same region of Babylon and the same region of Babel. Abram is called out of the beginnings of Babylon. So what happens when there's a version of humanity, Babylon, that the serpent nurtures along, versus God pulling out of that mess a family, and God nurtures that humanity along? Does that make sense? That's what we're seeing here paralleling throughout the story. And there'll be times these versions collide, And sometimes it's positive, often it's not, right, for the people of God. So, thoughts? Does this make sense? Right, so the problem here. But Yahweh, so when you see capital Lord, once again, the problem is English. It's the word Yahweh. It's a specific spiritual being. It's capital G God. So Yahweh here, there's been some debates on what Yahweh should best translate, but it's something along the lines of the I am that was and that will forever be. Now, that's as close as a name to God we have. He introduces himself not like just almighty or all-powerful or, those things are descriptors. This is as close as a name we have to God, capital G. It's Yahweh. Okay? But Yahweh came down, from the heavens, because that's where, the spiritual beings are, to see what they were building. And Yahweh said, if as one people speaking the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Okay, so what's the problem here?
They'll be able to convince people to do anything that we tell them to do.
Yeah.
We're connected to the gods now.
Yeah, they're connected, but they're connected to the spiritual presence of evil, right? The problem here is that they were all speaking, I don't know, probably not English, right? The problem isn't necessarily a particular language, is they had the same message. They were convincing people. They were attracting people. They were advertising in a way that was resonating with humanity, which was, come, let's be a god. Let's be our own gods. Come, let's put ourselves up in the heavens. Come, we don't need the spiritual forces. We don't need the spiritual beings. Now, the irony of that is the serpent's behind all this, right? It's the puppeteer. So Yahweh sees that if they are united in a destructive message, nothing will keep them from being destructive, from being evil, from unleashing chaos. In other words, if they swing fully to the serpent, what world would that be like?
One that he just wiped out.
One that he just wiped out and said, we're not going to do it that way again, right? We're not going to wipe it out this way again. So he comes down to intervene a different way. Not by let's start again, another people group. He's going to intervene differently. What God is, I don't even know if afraid is the word, but what God is noticing here is that if humanity swings completely to the message of the serpent, that would be, if you've ever watched a zombie apocalypse movie, just think that worse. It'd just be hell on earth. And God it just isn't going to let that happen. So God's going to come down and intervene. Okay? So what can we unpack out of some of this? They're attempting to construct a monument to self, right? To the glory of self. It is a search for immortality, but in all the wrong ways. They're trying to make a name for themselves apart from Yahweh's image. Later in the Ten Commandments, you shall not bear the name of the Lord in vain. You understand that don't go out and cuss, which is the bare minimum of what one should not do with the Lord. But that's the problem in the ancient world wasn't they just going around and cussing. The problem was that they were living in ways, albeit the ancient world by that time, on the Ten Commandments, recognizes Israel to be the bearers of Yahweh. They are the people of a particular God, Yahweh. Like the Egyptians were of the god Ra and a bunch of other gods. Like the Babylonians had Marduk and a bunch of other gods. Like every people group were known for particular gods. Israel was known to be the people of Yahweh. They had the name of Yahweh. So don't go live in a way that's going to profane the fact that people associate you with Yahweh. That's what it was saying there. And this is what they're trying to do, but towards the serpent or towards themselves. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Please don't cuss, right? But it's more than...
It's deeper than that.
It's deeper than that. Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
the word that is translated Babylon comes from a Hebrew word
Yes.
that means confusion.
Yes.
So the result of what they're trying to do
Yes.
is going to result eventually in confusion
Yes.
and division.
Yeah. In Hebrew, it resonates, but you can hear it in English too. Babel, babbling, Babylon, right? You can see it's one of the times in English that actually sounds the same. Like it's playing off the words. So this attempt here of the Tower of Babel and immortality and up to the heavens is really a babbling attempt to be a version of humanity that is absurd, and that's what Babylon is trying to be, or really is, or becomes. So this is also a satire of what Babylon claims to be, but actually really is. Right? This is probably one of the ancient satires, a political satire with a religious satire as well. It's also the assumption of self-sufficiency. We don't like to be told anything. I don't need anybody. Don't anybody tell me nothing. You know, I just, me, myself, and I, you know, like, well, this is an old problem. We don't need the gods. It's an act of rebellion to Yahweh, of course. And as they built the tower with new technology, they were every, brick being added, every person coming to gather around that amazing new, cool, bougie city. They're building the illusion that we don't need Yahweh. Right? I mean, we still spend a whole lot of time today building all this illusion. We don't need anybody. Let me just put it in a chart here. So, on the left side there, you have the motivation in the statements in Genesis 11. So, for example, the first one there, come let us build ourselves a city. So, at the surface intention, what they probably thought they were doing was a desire for progress, unity, and security. Oh, that sounds all right, doesn't it? Seldom does Satan show up and be like, hey, I'm the devil. Let's just set things on fire, and who wants to go to hell? Woo! We're a little more sophisticated than that. Well, so you got to phrase it in a way that sounds like, oh, that might be good. Right? We spend a whole lot of time playing with words and doing all kinds of interesting yoga with words today still, to kind of lean one direction versus the other. I would offer examples, but I don't want to stir anybody. So, but what's the actual underlying problem? It's a human-centered ambition. They're building a society apart from God. What's God's design? Well, that's not what God intended. He intended us to build, to landscape, to rule, to collaboratively create a world that he starts to illustrate in the Garden of Eden. Okay, I was going to sidetrack a rabbit hole, but I'll stop. Yeah.
What about the idea that they had gathered into this one place and he had talked to them originally about building the earth?
That's right. Go ye and spread my presence, and instead they're gathering under their own greatness. Yeah, for sure.
Changing the
yeah. God will come in and put his finger on that and scatter them. And the tower that reaches to the heavens. We already talked about this. They were seeking greatness and connection to the divine. That doesn't sound bad. But really what they're doing is an attempt to attain the heavens by human efforts, not by Yahweh's path there. Like God has always, on the other side of Genesis 3, been creating venues and avenues for us to come back to his presence. But it's through his efforts, not what we want to, how we want to get there. That's why there's a bazillion churches. We want to get to God the way we want to get there. So we just make our own thing. Okay, so that we may make a name for ourselves. The desire for identity and legacy. Yeah, that sounds fun. But actually, it's a rebellion against God's purpose. It's replacing God with glory of self. The very fact that we exist is special because we were created to bear the name of God. We are created to bear His image. We are created to collaborate with His purpose. We don't need to add anything. We don't need to spruce it up. That is our greatest worth. It's just by being what He created us to be. Lest we be scattered over the earth, over the face of the earth. So, maybe fear of loss, fragmentation, insecurity. But really what's happening is a refusal to obey God's command to fill the earth, right? In Genesis 1:28 and 9:1, which is repeated after the flood. The last one there at the bottom, building with bricks and tar instead of stone and mortar. So innovation, technological advancements, AI is just going to make us all happy. We can just sit around and sip, lemonade, and the AI is going to just, fill the world with happiness and joy until it takes over and kills us all. But that's a different problem. So what's really happening here, though? It's symbolic of human ingenuity, but used for self-promotion, used for building ourselves up, not for being good stewards of what God's purpose is. God has given us ingenuity, creativity, and the ability to create, but we don't use that for good, or not often for good, or not only for good, right? So we're co-creators. We're always co-creators of this world. It's either by the influence of God or the influence of the serpent, or sometimes a little of both. There's no version of human not paired up with a spiritual force. No version of human, at least as the biblical story presents. So we're either agents of heaven or agents of hell. It's kind of what the imagery eventually unravels. Any thoughts on this chart? Yeah. Les?
It doesn't end here, though.
No, thankfully.
Babylon became the great nation.
Yes.
And who was the one character that was the real key element? Nebuchadnezzar.
Yes. In yeah.
The Israelites. So he got on top of the wall of Babylon and said, "Oh, look what a great place I have built."
Yeah. And then he gets to go eat pasture land. Yeah. Good. Yeah.
But he was following the same philosophy that the early days of Babylon.
Yeah, he embodies both versions, right? He embodies the version of, look at the monument I've created to self. Well, then God puts him out to pasture. We often try to buy meat that's been grass-fed. That was Nebuchadnezzar. Very organic, just feeding out there in the grass. And God humbles him. And then he comes to his senses. And then, at least for a period of time, he rules actually as somewhat a blessing. And then, of course, Daniel plays a role in that. And so Babylon has some moments along the way, with some exceptions for good, of course. Good. Anybody else? Any thoughts on this particular chart or comments so far? Nice. It's just so well explained. What else would one say, right?
There is one other extra thing there, and that's successor from Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar.
Yeah.
In the handwriting on the wall,
Goes downhill, doesn't it?
he said, "You have weighed the balances upon wanting."
Yeah.
Because unlike Nebuchadnezzar, you didn't show any kind of allegiance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then Babylon will fall, to be no more ever. I mean, at least not to this day, right? It just, the Medo-Persians come in, and I read some stuff on some historical records, 2 weeks period of time, just gone as a power. And remember that projection, that statue, that image, that vision that King Nebuchadnezzar had of the statue made of different parts, and the head is gold, and it goes like different lower metals all the way to like mud and some iron and stuff. And then there's a stone, there's a mountain of the heavens, like there's a mount in the heavens, and from there there's a stone that comes down, crushes that image, and then as that stone lands, it grows to be a mountain, reflecting the mountain in the heavens. All right, then Daniel's interpretation is what? First of all, you, Nebuchadnezzar, and the Babylon that's been created is the head of gold. Like, it probably was a most amazing kingdom in terms of what it looked like. Like, it truly was something that gathered people to. Like, he had his hanging gardens. There's been some artist renditions, some AI attempts to create what that might have looked like. Like, it truly was golden looking. And then it just goes from there, you know, the Medo-Persians, and then the Greeks, and then the Romans. And in the time of the Romans, there is something of the heavens that comes down and will crush the kingdoms, or will crush the power that the serpent has used the kingdoms to create. And it's a kingdom that then will last forever, as promised, you know, to King David, as promised to Abraham. And that's Jesus, like the kingdom of God in the hearts of his people. It's a kingdom that lasts. Yeah, hold that thought. I got one more thing to say before I connect us to Acts. So, then in Genesis 11, verse 7 and 9, so come let us go down. I just want to pause there one more time. Who's this us?
The Godhead.
There's an us up there. Right? That's also said in Genesis 1:27, where it says, let us create humanity in our own image. Who's that us? Now, I think eventually the story unpacks God, fathers. But at this point in time, you're just like, there's spiritual beings up there somewhere. There's an us on the side of Yahweh. And I think eventually the idea, or at least here, and as it unpacks, is that God is He is a relational experience. He's not just one. He's one but more. He's one but three but one. He's love, which I also don't think it just means some feeling. I think it means a relational experience is love. It's not just floating feeling somewhere. It's relationally expressed. And so there's an us, right? And then who knows what the ancient world made of that. But come let us go down and confuse their language so that they will not understand each other and that they will not be of this same distorted message. Okay? So Yahweh, once again, a specific spiritual being, scattered them from there all over the earth, and they stopped building the city. This is why it's called Babel, or Babylon, because there they started babbling, and that's really a satire of Babylon. That's nothing but a babbling bunch of, babbling fool. Yeah, it's just, so that's kind of the play here. Now, I don't know, is this where everybody got different languages and somebody left speaking Portuguese? Or I don't know, maybe. I'm not sure. I don't know if that's all that the story's trying to say, but whatever's happening here is that they were united in a particular destructive message and worldview. And, and God just like, we got to put our finger on that, and we got to scatter you to go out and not unite under that banner. That banner of humans up to the heavens without Yahweh. I don't know, maybe somebody left speaking Portuguese, and they left like, vou sair daqui então, não vou construir mais essa torre de Babel. Falou, right? And you can see why that's relevant. That's not me just speaking in tongues, it is speaking in tongues, but it's not the power of the Holy Spirit. That's just me speaking Portuguese. I guess we shouldn't speak it unless somebody translates. All right, here's what I said. Yeah, I'm done with this mess. I'm not going to stay here building this tower anymore. See ya. Okay, so y'all can now feel inspired. Okay. Here's the cool thing, though. So here, the story of the Bible it's brilliantly written. The story of the Bible, where you and I today, if I was writing, a research paper, you have to give credit to the things that you are citing, right? Got a little footnote or an endnote, and I would, you would say something like, Bob Harrington once said, and you just, then quote it and whatnot. Okay, that's not always how the Bible does it. Actually, quite often it's not done that way. Occasionally there is a quote, like the prophet Isaiah. But often it's through imageries that is trying to get the attentive reader to be like, oh, I got to go back and upload this whole story and then read this story. For example, when we get to Acts chapter 2, what's happening in Acts chapter 2? We're on the other side of, of Pentecost. We're on the other side of Passover. We're during Passover, which brilliant timing. Jesus dies on the cross as the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. Passover is a celebration when Pharaoh, wanted death to come upon everybody. The 10th plague is death. It was coming to everybody except the blood of the Lamb. Death would come, see it's been paid, it would pass over, and off it went. Because of that, Israel was freed from physical death, spiritual death, to be molded into a nation. Jesus dies so that all those things can happen to us spiritually. Spiritually freed from slavery, spiritually freed from death, and then to be molded into God's eternal kingdom. Okay, you with me? So that happens then. So then 50 days later, so Jesus resurrected, 50 days later Pentecost, Jesus, ascends and go back to the heavens, which is an imagery of Daniel chapter 7, the one like the Son of Man that seemed to be crushed by the beastly powers, actually comes back to life, rides a cloud back to the heavens, all the way back to sit in the throne room of God, to co-rule with God against the nations. And that's Jesus. He goes back to the heavens. Okay. So then Jesus says to his disciples to stay in Jerusalem, right? That represented the presence of God with the temple, not to last long. The other 40 years is going to be destroyed by the Babylonians. Well, the Romans, reflecting the Babylonians. And says that the power of God will come upon you. So in Acts chapter 2, there's Peter and everybody hanging out. All kinds of folks are there. And there's this loud noise like a wind. In Hebrew, the word wind, the concept represents the presence of God, the Spirit of God. So God's Spirit comes upon them. And then they have upon them like this symbol that looks like burning tongues. And then Peter gets up. Just like if there's an accident, everybody comes out to see what's happening, right? Everybody comes out to see, and Peter gets up there and has like a United Nations kind of experience. He starts speaking, and guess what everybody else is doing with the power of the Holy Spirit? They're translating. They're not speaking some angelic language. They are translating into languages of people that have been gathered to Jerusalem. So there in Acts 2, you have the Tower of Babel in reverse. God has gathered from the nations that have been scattered because of persecution to his people, in good part by the Babylonians 500 years before, and has regathered them around his presence, there the temple, but actually around Jesus, his truest presence. And now on the other side of Jesus winning death over death, we have a message translated in unison to the nations. And now they have gathered, not under the illusion of the tower, but actually by the real way you can connect to the heavens, which is Jesus. None of it is accidental. It's all an unfolding story that God's moving along. Now, it's a little, shameless plug of why I often go back to Genesis. In my humble opinion, if you really don't understand the backstory, which is in part what we're doing here, you don't fully grasp what's happening when you get to the New Testament. You can still get the message, Jesus, that's the heart of it. But if you would miss the connection of Acts chapter 2. Thoughts? I think we got There's 2 bells, right? Questions, thoughts? Does that make sense? All right. Final thoughts here then. So the events of the Tower of the Babel show that people have been trying since Genesis 3 forward to put ourselves into the heavens with the gods or to be our gods. Either way, it's a horrible mess. The story of the Tower of the Babel also illustrates the continuing problem that without God, it really is an illusion. We will just create greatness, but really it's reflecting the presence of the serpent. It looks great, it seems wild, it seems amazing, it seems like a sophisticated, message to let's come together and be ourselves and what. It's just a mess. It's just a mess. God comes down, intervenes, scatters to then gather. By the way, what does the word ecclesia, the word for church, mean? Yeah, the gathered ones, the called out. Not around the Tower of Babel, but around the presence of God in Jesus. So, all right, thanks everybody. Next week we'll be back to Dale. I'm not sure where he's going to go next. I'm sure there'll be a handout, so y'all can fill that. Thanks for your attention.
Down there where Daniel's going to school. I want to tell him.
Daniel.
Sullivan.
He works down there.
Well,